Guitar intervals, C major, A minor, and related modes. This time focusing in on E Phrygian, pivoting around, measuring from the E note located on the second string down from the top of the guitar. Remembering one of our objectives is to get all of our resources orientated in the same direction, making them as easy on the eyes from the perspective of the player of the guitar. And of course, the player of the guitar is located behind the guitar, and therefore, for example, we're going to orientate my guitar so it looks like I'm left-handed, which I might actually be, but I'm not playing left-handed. We just flipped the guitar around so it would mirror what you're doing from your perspective on your guitar from behind the guitar. And when we are behind the guitar in playing position, we typically have the fretboard on the left-hand side, the low or heavy string closest to the ceiling on top, going from left to right towards the body of the guitar. This way, we have orientated our worksheet similarly, having this represent the low or heavy string, the one on top closest to the ceiling, top to bottom, left to right, orientated as though we took our guitar and simply implanted it onto the screen, so everything's basically going in the same direction. We're now going to be looking at the intervals related to this E, so that's kind of our pivot point. You can kind of imagine if you were using one of those things where you draw a circle around something and you put the little pointer right here and then you draw the circle. That's the pivot point. That's where we're measuring from. That's where we're going to make our little circle around. What is that thing called? The compass, is it? I'm drawing a blank. That's okay. That's okay. You get the picture. That's what we're doing here. So in prior presentations, we thought about it from the perspective of the C major, and then we followed up to the D. So the idea being, we want to look at the shape for the C major scale and all of the related modes, which is going to be, C Ionian or major, D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, G Mixolydian, and that will allow us to practice this same shape. Even though we're going through all of the different modes, it will allow us to touch in on all of the different intervals, even those that aren't in, say, the C major scale, and it will allow us to reiterate basically this shape as we go. Now, this shape, of course, is the most common on fret 5. For most people, you might call it shape number 1, or from a caged system like a G-shaped C chord, which would look like this if you had 5 notes going from A to A. If I have 7 notes, it would look like that. And so if you're not familiar with that shape, that's okay. You could still go through the exercise, but the idea here is we're going to be looking at all the notes that are in essence, that same scale. We looked up here on the C note, and then we looked at all of the intervals related to the C major. Then we moved up to the D, using it as the pivot point, and then we realigned and thought about what are the intervals of the D Dorian, if I think of that as my starting point, and what would my intervals be as we compare them to the C, and then measure them out. And now we're going to the next note up, and that would be the third note if I was looking at it from the perspective of the C major, which would be this E, which I can now reorientate to the Phrygian. So let me just explain that one more time here. If I go up top and I look at our notes from the perspective of a C major, which is typically our checkpoint or our first measuring point in Western music, then the third of that scale is going to be the E. And I can call that third basically a minor chord construction we would create from it, because if I just build every other note from that point, I end up with a minor third instead of a major third, which means I end up with a minor triad. However, if I want to be in the same scale, it's not enough just to have the 1, 3, 5. I want to look at all 7 notes that are still in the same scale, which will still result in a minor triad for the Phrygian mode, but it won't have all of the intervals the same as, say, a minor scale, because we're going to be in essence, the Phrygian. So I'm going to call this the Phrygian. I call the absolute mode number 3, just so I have a numbering system for it, noting that numbering system is relative to the major scale, which I think is appropriate because that's basically our key generally. That's our reference point oftentimes in Western music. So I'm going to say we're going to be looking at this from mode number 3, which I call Phrygian. Mode number 3 means it's third position if we were thinking from the perspective of the major scale. Now, instead of just measuring from here, we're gonna go down and say, let's make it the first note. So now it is the first note, and we're gonna look at all of our intervals as they compared to the first note in the Phrygian scale, E Phrygian being a relative scale, having all the same notes in it, in other words, as the C major scale. So you can see all the colored notes are the same as we had up here. All the colored notes are the same, except there's different colors for the 1, 3, 5, because the 1, 3, 5 are now being measured. That's what creates the normal or the main triad for whatever scale we are in this case, the Phrygian scale. So it's going to be creating the Phrygian scale on the 1, 3, 5 based on the E being the focal point. So that's going to be the general idea. We're going to be measuring from here now. So let's just analyze the Phrygian a little bit. So the Phrygian is going to be a minor mode. And you can see that if I go up to the major scale, which is kind of our checkpoint, you might memorize that you have the 1 of the major scale builds a major chord, the 2 and the 3 build a minor chord, the 4 and the 5 build a major chord, the 6 builds a minor chord, and then you've got the crazy Locrian diminished, right? And so if we go further than that, that helps us just to basically play more than just, see, if I was going to make a song, of course, I can play all of these notes, and I could add a power chord, a fifth, which makes the chord, it's still ambiguous. I don't know if it's going to be a major or minor because I'm just going to ignore the third. So that would be one way I can play power chords, and if I just know the notes, but I don't know if it's major or minor, I can at least do that, add the fifth. But then I can try to memorize that the 1, 4, 5 is major, the 2, 3, and 6 is minor, and then I can add the appropriate thirds, major and minor third, which is the distinguishing factor of the chords. If I want to go beyond that, then I have to memorize not just what creates a major and minor chord, I have to actually know in essence the modes, because the mode is basically going to tell me not only the 1, 3, 5, but the 7, 9, 11, and 13, or the 2, 4, and 6, and 7, right? The other notes that we can add, and that's going to help us with the modality. So that's what we will be looking at here. So if I look at the major scale as our reference in intervals, noting that I can build this shape over here in terms of all of the notes that are in the shape on the guitar by either just memorizing the shape per mode, major, minor, and so on, or I can construct it with a formula, whole, whole, half, as I go from one to the other, in essence intervals, but interval from one to the other, as opposed to the intervals referencing to the major or the pivot point, the main note. Or I can use the intervals, meaning I'm going to measure everything from the starting point, in this case a C, and I'll measure out from that point to create basically the shape, which is basically what we're focusing in on here. The major being our focal point, so it has a perfect first, a 2-note away major second, a 4-note away major third, a 5-note away perfect fourth, a 7-note away perfect fifth, a 9-note away major sixth, and 11-note away major 7. Now, if I go to the main minor, you would expect then the perfects to remain the same. That's the 1, 4, and the 5. You would expect them to have the same distance because they're perfects. That's one way we can think of it. And then you would expect all of the ones that have a major to become minor, meaning we flatten them, take them back a step. Except for the second here. For some reason, the main minor, which is the Aeolian mode, doesn't have a flat second. It's actually the Phrygian that has the flat second. So that's kind of interesting. So then we're going to be on the Phrygian, which is a minor mode. So typically what we want to do is learn the major, then learn the minor, which is easy to just say, I'm just going to keep the perfect intervals, and then just the major second is the same. That's the weird one. And then I look at the other two minor modes, Dorian and Phrygian, which will only have one interval different than the main minor, which is Aeolian. So we're on Phrygian right now. What's the one interval that's different than the Aeolian, the main minor? It's actually that major second. The Aeolian has a major second. The Phrygian doesn't. It has actually a minor second. So really, the reason in my thought process that we use Aeolian as the main minor is just people liked it better. You know, it's not a logical reason in that it's the opposite of the major, because you would think, just looking at it, the opposite of the major would actually be Phrygian, right? Phrygian is what you would expect the main minor to be. Why? Because it would have all the perfects are still there, and then all of the major intervals get flipped to minors. That's what happens in the Phrygian. The Aeolian, which is the one you would expect that to happen because that's our minor scale, doesn't have all the majors flipped to a minor because the second still has a major second. Okay? So really you can think of like the Phrygian as a darker, heavier kind of sound because it has that minor second in it. And I would really think of that as the opposite, really, and from an interval standpoint at least, of the major, because it's the one that flips all of the majors to minors by flattening them, whereas the main minor doesn't. All right, so let's take a look at that. If I look at these intervals, then we've got the 0 note away perfect first. If I look at it from the perspective of the Phrygian, in this case E Phrygian, and that makes sense because it's always a perfect first because it's going to be the same octave. And then here's the funny one right off the bat. And that's why Phrygian also is easier to memorize, because it's the first interval that's the weird one. So you got to say, where's the weird interval as I compare to its related major or minor, this one being compared to its related minor, which is the Aeolian. It's right on the second interval, right? And that means the main minor has a 2 note away major second, as does the major keys, but the Phrygian has a 1 note away minor second. So remember, this 2 over here, the second represents the second in the scale, and the fact that it has a little m is supposed to tell us that we know it's major or minor, but we want to actually know the steps. So I'm going to actually list out the steps: 1 note away minor second. And then it has a 3 note away minor third with a little m, that 3 representing the position in the scale, and this 3 representing the actual distance in notes, remembering that the third is the thing that will define whether we're talking about a major chord, minor chord, which only has a 1, 3, 5, and it will also determine if we have a major mode or a minor mode, in this case the minor mode of the Phrygian. It's being determined in essence by the third. That's the thing that gives the flavor, the big flavor factor of is it major or minor. And then we've got the 5 note away perfect fourth. It's perfect. It's the same as in the major, as C major, and it's the same as the main minor, which is the main minor scale or Aeolian. It's got a 7 note away perfect fifth, as we would expect normally, because that's what's in the major, and it's perfect. Therefore, it's also in the main minor, and it's in the Phrygian here. Then we have the 8 note away minor 6, which is what we would expect to happen when I compare it to the major, because it has a major 9 note away major 6 got flattened to an 8 note away minor 6. That 8 note away minor 6 is the same as it would be on the main minor scale, which is, or mode or scale, which is the Aeolian mode. And then we have a 10 note away minor 7, which of course again is what we would expect, because in the major scale we would have a 11 note away major 7, which we would flatten to a 10 note away minor 7, and that minor 7 is the same in the main minor, which is the Aeolian or minor scale, which also has, of course, a 10 note away minor 7. All right, so let's measure it around this E over here. So we're going to say, first, let's just look at the octaves. So that's going to be the perfect first. We'll look at all the octaves and try to find them on each string, remembering that I should be able to find the distance that's reachable on each string if I'm somewhere in the middle of the guitar, and therefore I can reach either left or right, and I should only have a maximum difference of 6 frets because there's only 12 notes. And therefore, if I can go both ways to reach, then 12 divided by 2 is 6. And therefore, it's just out of reach if it's 6. But if it's 5 frets away or less, then I should be able to reach any interval on any string as I measure from any point. The point I'm measuring from here, of course, being this E, which means we're going to be looking at intervals that will be in the Phrygian mode as we're looking at this shape, which is equivalent to the C major shape and the D Dorian shape. All right, so let's do that. If I go up a string, we can see the E is right there. So I got to go 12 steps up to go to the next octave. When I go up, I usually call that a negative because I usually think of it as the inverse, because usually we go down when we count things out. So I'm going to say this is going to be -5. And then when I go this way, it's going to go down. So -5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then 0 or 12. And there's the octave. Let's do it from here. So I'm on this E on the 7th fret. So I'm going to say -5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, or 12. So we have how many? So that means that when I go up a string, that the octave is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets up. So that's always going to be the case unless I'm crossing the fault line going from this up to here, right? So if I'm going up, the octave is always going to be 5 frets forward, which means it's going to be 5 minus or 12 minus 5 or 7 frets back. So octave, and that's actually the exact same note it's supposed to be. It's not really an octave, but I'm thinking of it as a circle in essence. So then we're going to go down a string. Now notice the symmetry here, right? If I go down a string, it's nice and convenient. Then it's going to be backwards the other way. So it's going to be back here. So if I go down a string, the octave, I go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, or 12. So if I go down a string from here, 5 down, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So boom, it's hard to reach that one even though it's 5 frets. You can almost get it, but it's harder to go 5 frets back than 5 frets forward because they have longer frets, right? But it's still almost your maximum distance that, you know, a normal hand can reach, basically. So if I go down one string, then the octave is always going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets back, which is the maximum distance. Again, I can usually almost touch with one while touching both notes at the same time. So if I go up, it's going to be 5 frets forward. If I go down, the octave is going to be 5 frets back. All right, let's go down unless we cross the fault line, but that's the exception to the rule. Let's go down 2 strings and we look for the E. We see the octave right there. That's possibly the most common one that most people know well. And if we count that up, it should be 12 out. So we're going to say, let's count it up. 5, 10, 11, 12. If I count it up from here, I'm right there. 5, 10, 11, 12. So that makes sense. So that means that if I go down 2 strings, the octave will be 2 frets forward. Always, unless I cross the fault line. So the default position, if I go down 2 strings, the octave will be 2 frets forward. What would happen if I crossed the fault line? Well, this fault line, the tectonic plate shifted to the right. So that means if I cross the fault line and I go down 2 strings, it'll be 3 frets forward. All right, so then we're going to go down. Let's go to the next one down. Notice the normal pattern is that it goes back and forth, right? So like the E was over here on this side, and then I went to this side of this E, and then I went back to this side of the E. That's normally the case, although it gets a little out of whack when things are pretty close to the middle point here because the tectonic shift kind of throws that off. But that's one way that you might see it, right? If I know when I go above to the octave, I'm going forward. When I'm going down to the octave, I'm going backwards. When I'm going down 2, I'm going forward. When I'm going down 3, I'm going backwards. Down 4, you could think of it as going forwards. All right, so then now I'm going down 3 strings and across the fault line. So now we're going to say that's going to be 5, 10, and then shifting up here to 15, which I could bring down to 3 because I could say 15 minus 12 is 3, 2, 1, 0, or 12. There's the octave. So I can do it this way. 5, 10, and then shifting this way to 15. 15 minus 12 is 15 minus 12 is going to be 3, and then 2, 1, 0, there's the octave. So that means that if I go down 3 strings and I cross the fault line, then the octave is always going to be 2 frets back. What if I didn't cross the fault line? Well, this fault line tectonic plate shifted to the right. Therefore, if I went down 3 strings and didn't cross the fault line, it would not be 2 frets back, but rather 3 frets back. All right, so then let's go down 4 strings, which means I'm going to cross the fault line by definition, and therefore there is no exception to the rule when I go down 4 strings. And we're going to say the E is going to be up here. Now, once again, I could measure up first. So I might say, well, look, that's going to, let me measure it to the top string first and then measure it down there. So I can do that and say, okay, it would be -5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And therefore the other side would be down here as well. Or I can count it down 5, 10, and then this way 15. 15 minus 12 is 3. And then if I go down again, another 5 makes it up to 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Boom. So that would be, I won't count it out again because we counted it out before, but it's going to be up here. So that means that if I go down 1, 2, 3, 4 strings, I'm always going to cross the fault line. Therefore, it will always be the octave 1, 2, 3, 4 frets forward. All right. So now let's go to the next one, and we're going to say now we're going to be on in the E Phrygian. We're on the second. Now the second is an even number. Therefore, when I do a chord construction, we skip it 1, 3, 5, 7, and then we go to the 9. So the 9, if I think of it as a circle, is equivalent to the second. So we can call it then. It's going to be in essence a minor second or a minor 9 if we think about it from a chord construction perspective, remembering that I'm not trying to think about octaves. I'm just thinking about all the notes like in a circle here. And so now so the 9 in that thought process is equivalent to the second. All right, so this is the funny one. So this is the one that's the distinguishing factor between the Phrygian and the minor, because even the minor has a major second, a 2-note away major second. The Phrygian has that half step, which is right there, gives you that jaws sound. Remembering that the inverse is the 11-note away, a major 7. So you get that sound, and so that means that what if you wanted to like pivot from, like, you went to C major and then you made the D the focal point, you went to D Dorian because they have all the same notes and you just made it sound like the D was the focal point, and then you go to E Phrygian and then maybe you want to switch to E minor. What if you wanted to switch to E minor? Well, then what you could do is you can just move that second instead of doing the half step, we can move it up, augment it to here, and you could just adjust your shape, shifting the second up, and then you'd basically be playing the shape that is in accordance with an E minor as opposed to an E Phrygian, and then you can look at all of the related modes based on the E minor, right? So you could start to see how like all these things fit together so that you can play in different scales, but also possibly how you can move from one mode to another mode somewhat seamlessly by seeing how closely related they are. What's the focal point that I could shift from, any of these related modes I can shift to, because they're all the same notes, by just making the focal point these. It's not that it's easy to say, it's not as easy to do in practice, but if you practice that, you would think you can basically do that, right? And then you can go to any of these notes and go to their related major or minor scale fairly easily, you would think. Why? Because they only have one interval that's different. So then you just have to change one note, because if you didn't play that note, you wouldn't even know whether you're in, for example, E Phrygian, or if you're in E minor. If you didn't play the second, it would be ambiguous on that front. And then if you just switched from the second being the minor second to the major second, then you would have made the subtle switch going to the right. So anyway, that's going. My head is hurting. My head is hurting. So let's move on. So the second is going to be right here. So we're going to go boom, boom. On the second, it's going to be one note away. What if I went up one string? So then we have an F. There's back here. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 back. So this is the one that has the maximum distance. I see another one up here that's past 12, which is past where we repeat. So let's just look at this one, even though that's one's a little bit more difficult to reach because it's going to go backwards towards the fatter frets. If I go up one, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm looking for the one note away minor second. But if I go up, I have to look for the inverse distance. So the inverse distance would be 12 minus 1, which would be 11. So if I go say this is going to be -5 from here to here, 4 or 6 or -6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So therefore, if I went from this, let's count it this way, it'd be -5, -6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So if I went from here to, where was I here? It's kind of a funky sound. That would be the 11 note away major 7. But if I go up from E to F, that's going to be the one note away minor second, which is equivalent to a one note away minor ninth from a chord construction standpoint, at least the way we're looking at it. All right, so then if I go on the same one, it's going to be right there. So, and then if I go down one, we see the F is back here, so I just have to count one note away. I'm using the wrong colors. I want to use my E over here, this one. So how do I count that? It's going to be, now I can count normally. I need to go up one to get to the one note away minor second. So I have 5 here, then 4, 3, 2, 1. Counting it this way, 5 here, 4, 3, 2, 1. So boom, boom. And that means that if I go down one string, then the one note away minor second or one note away minor ninth will always be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets back unless I'm crossing the fault line, in which case, because the tectonic plate shifted to the right, it would be less, right? It would be shifted up, and therefore it would only be 3 frets back instead of 4 frets back. All right, let's do the next one down. We're going to go say here, there it is. So now I'm looking for the one note away minor second. So we're going to say this is going to be 5, 10, and then 11, 12, or 0, because it goes back around the horn, and then 1. So let's do it from here. It's going to go 5, 10, and then 11, 12, or 0, and then 1. So there's my F right there. So, and you can always, it might be useful just to check that to like, I should be doing, and then do it here. So do it on the same string, and I can see that's the octave. Right, and so that's going to be that. So there it is. So that means if I go down 2 strings, the one note away minor second will always be 3 frets forward unless I cross the fault line, in which case, because this tectonic shape shifted to the right, if I cross the fault line, and I go down 2 strings, the one note away minor second will be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets forward in that case. All right, let's go down to the next one. So we'll go down here. We have going down 3 strings and crossing the fault line. So it's 5, 10, 15, and then I could go from 15 down to 3. 15 minus 12 is 3, 2, 1. So let's count that out this way. I've got from here, there's my E on the 7th fret, 5, 10, shifting up to get to 15 here. 15 minus 12 is 3, and then we're going 2, 1. All right, so there we have it from here to here. So if I go down 1, 2, 3, if I go down 3 strings and cross the fault line, the 1 note away minor second will be 1 fret back. What if I didn't cross the fault line? Well, because this fault line shifted everything to the right, you'd have to go 2 frets back if it wasn't crossing the fault line. So normally, if I go down 3 strings, the 1 note away minor second would be 2 frets back, unless, as the exception here, we do cross the fault line, then it would only be 1 fret back. Okay, so let's go down to the next one, and it's going to be down here. Now you could use the trick that we did before and say, okay, that's kind of this string is quicker to get to, and it has the same notes on it. So could I go up? If I go up, I have to use the inverse though. So I got to say, okay, well, it's a 1 note away minor second. The inverse distance, therefore, is 12 minus 1, or 11. And that would be -5, 6, -7, -8, -9, -10, -11. If I get to it here, it will be the same note down here. Or I can count it out this way: 5, 10, 15, which I could say 15 minus 12 is 3, plus 5 is 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom. So it would be way over there, and I can't quite reach it because it's 6 frets. It's right in the middle. So that's the one that's going to be out of reach. All other intervals will basically be within reach. All right, let's go to the next one down. Spending way too much time. You're pulling too much time, man. You're breaking your own rules. You've got to get to the cut to the chase of it. All right. So now we're on the third, the defining factor. This one we probably know a little bit better just normally because we make it. The third is going to be part of our normal chord construction. So we probably have a better intuition of just where it is because we finger it all the time if we're playing just triad chords, which is the main thing we typically play. So we really want to know where the thirds are and know the difference between a minor third and a major third. We're looking here at the minor third, which is the distinguishing factor, both in terms of whether something is a minor or major chord and whether it's a minor or major mode. All right, so we're going to say then that the third, if I do it on the same string, it's going to be a 3-note up minor third. So this 3 represents the third position in the scale. This 3 represents the distance in our baseline measuring half step. So we got 1, 2, 3. That's what it sounds like. Now, what if I go up a string then? Well, if I go up a string, I have to look for the inverse distance. So if I'm looking for a 3-note away minor third, 12 minus 3 is 9. So the inverse of a 3-note away minor third is a 9-note away, which is actually a major. The inverse of a minor is always a major. The inverse of a major is a minor. The inverse is a 9-note away major, which would be a 6, right? So 9-note away major 6. So it's going to be -5, 6, 7, -8, -9. There it is. If I count it over here, I'm going to go up 1, which I'm going to say -5, -6, -7, -8, -9. Boom. Did I do that right? I think so. So top to bottom, G to E, I'm going to call that a 9-note away major 6. And therefore the bottom to top, measuring from the E, must be a 3-note away minor third. All right, so I can kind of test that out this way and say, here's my 3-note away minor third to this way. So, right, you could kind of get the feel for it, even though the octaves are different and it's inverted. All right, so then let's go down a string and say, we're going to say, I could see it, donde right there. That's possibly the most familiar one to us. So if I go down a string, I just go, this is going to be 5, 4, 3. So if I go down a string, 5, 4, 3, boom, boom. So if I go down one string, the 3-note away minor third is always 2 frets back, which is different than the major, which would only be 1 fret back, which is why we flatten it. We might say, you might hear it said, if it was a major third, you flatten it to get to the minor third. So the minor third is always 2 frets back if we go down one string, unless we cross the fault line. What would happen if we cross the fault line? Well, the fault line tectonic shape plate shifts to the right. Therefore, if I was crossing the fault line and I go one string down, the 3-note away minor third would be only 1 fret back, looking like the shape of a major third, which is going to throw us off unless we contextualize in our mind the shape of the default when it's not crossing the fault line, and then when it does cross the fault line, which is only going to happen if you are measuring on this string, right? Because if you were down here, it would still be a major third away, right? Right there, that distance is going to be the same. But if you're right here, it's going to be right there because you're crossing the fault line. All right, we get it. We get it. Go down to the next one. You're beating the dead horse. You're beating the dead horse. Well, the dead horse doesn't mind. It's dead. If I feel like beating the horse that's dead, then that's what I'll do. I don't feel bad about it. You're trying to make me feel bad about beating a dead horse. It's already dead. Why do you care if anyways, whatever. Let's go to the next one down. This is going to be, if I go down 2 strings, it's going to be 5 10 and then 10 9 8 7 6 5. Wait a second. Que paso aquí? I'm all thrown off here. Let's try this again. All right, here we go. We're going to go, this is going to be 5 10 and then 11 12 or 0, bringing us back to the octave, and then 1 2 3. So let's count it this way. We've got 5 10 and then 11 12 or 0. There's the octave, and then 1 2 3. Boom. So, okay. So that means that if I go down 2 strings, then if I go down 2 strings, the 3-note away minor third will always be 1 2 3 4 5 frets up, which is kind of like the maximum distance I can typically reach while touching both notes, unless I cross the fault line. If I cross the fault line, what would happen then, you might ask? Well, that would mean that because this tectonic shape shifts up, it would be 6 frets out. It would shift out further, and I probably wouldn't be able to reach it. It would be that one that's just out of reach. Just like Indiana Jones when he's reaching for the Holy Grail, but then he was like, just let it go, man, because his dad told him, and then he lets it, because it's just not, you can almost get there, but not, but you have to, 5 frets, man, that's all you got. That's what you got, unless you have to. Anyway, let's go to the next one down, and we're going to say this is going to be, if I go 3 strings down and cross the fault line, so it's going to be 5 10 and then 15 going here, and then 15 minus 12 is 3. So if I count it this way, it would be 5 10 going up here to 15. What is that? 5 10 going up here would be 15. 15 minus 12 is 3, so there it is right there. That's possibly a more common one because that is in our minor shape, which would be, this would be an A minor shaped E minor chord, and so we have that. So that means that if I go down 3 strings and cross the fault line, then the 3-note away minor third will always be 1 fret forward. What would happen if I didn't cross the fault line? Well, this fault line is pushing all of this stuff to the right, therefore it would be on the same fret. So if I was up here, you could see if I went 3 strings down, boom, 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 it would be on the same fret, not 1 fret forward. But because I crossed the fault line here, it's 1 fret forward. Okay, let's go down to the next one. And again, we can use our little trick. We could say now we're on the bottom string and it's closer to get to the top string. So let me find it on the top string first. But if I want to find the 3-note away minor third on the top string, I have to look at the inverse distance because I'm going above it instead of below it. Therefore, the 3-note away minor third has an inverse of 12 minus 3, which is 9-note away distance, which happens to be a major 6. So it would be -5, 6, -7, -8, -9. And if I find it there, it's going to be the same on the bottom. Or I can count it down if I want to. 5, 10, 15. 15 minus 12 is 3. Plus another 5 is 8. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. And I won't count it out again here. We'll just say boom, boom. It's going to be. So there it is. So we'll continue with the next one next time.